I'd like to continue with another video on how to create an animation in Drishti using CT scans or using a CT volume. And we're going to start with that same shrew scan that I discussed in the previous video. So now I'm just going to load up that volume in Drishti. Same thing, same volume as before, as I mentioned. And here it is. I'm going to tweak a couple things, so make sure it doesn't drop in resolution as I move the volume. As I did before, I'm going to change the camera type to orthographic. I'm going to add a scale bar. All that's explained in the previous video that I'll put the link to. Step size to 1. And as you recall in the previous video, to make an animation, you need your keyframe editor. So here it is. As you saw, I selected that from with the left mouse button in the view menu. And so now what I'd like to do is make an animation not with the menu item that we discussed before. That's what was in the previous video. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to make a more dense series of keyframes, and this is going to allow me a couple things, one of which I think you'll find quite useful, which is adding labels. Okay, so let's do the same thing. We're just going to rotate this 180 degrees over the course of, say, 90 frames. So I'm going to set the keyframe for the first image, and instead of making a keyframe way over here at 90, I'll do it every 10. It's going to be a little bumpy. Because Drishti is going to try and interpolate between these various keyframes I've set. But because I make more keyframes, hopefully it won't be so. You may recall in the previous video when I did just one in the beginning and one at 90, it zoomed way in and lost a lot of the image outside of the field of view. So let's make one more for now, and then after this we'll make a label. So I'm going to set a keyframe, or set the next image at keyframe 20. Move the movie back to 1 just to see what we've got so far, and there it is. So that's pretty good, if I say so myself. Now, another thing I actually didn't mention before is that Drishti still has some, I don't want to call them bugs, but it's impossible to make a program that never crashes, frankly, or at least very hard. I certainly don't know how to do it. And so what you have to do on a regular basis is save your project. You just have to do that. So we'll click on Save As, left click, and then we're just going to call this movie 1, and it'll save it as an XML so that well, obvious reasons, if it does crash, you can always come back and you'll have these 3 keyframes or whatever it was that you've saved ready to go again. Okay, so let's make a label here. Let's go back to that first keyframe. I just left click on the first keyframe in my keyframe editor. I'll make that a little more visible here. And now what I want to do is label the coronoid process of the mandible, and I'm going to label this by using a path. Okay, so to make a path, you have to hold down the Shift key and then left mouse click, and then you see that blue button, and when you hover over it, it turns green. A path needs at least 2 points, because I'm just going to make a simple line, so I only need 2 points, and then I'm going to end that line on the coronoid process, the tip of the coronoid process. Again, I hit Shift, left click. And I have my 2 points, and now I hit the space bar, and I need the command path. So I just type PATH, and there it is. That's my path. Now, you don't necessarily want your label, which is going to appear next to that first point that I created. Maybe you want that out into space. So in order to do that, you can't start your path out in empty space. It has to be linking to a rendered voxel, but it's not a big deal. So you just take the original point you suggested, drag it out to wherever you want the label to appear, and there it is. And by the way, that L 2.95 as you might guess, is the length of that path. So that's really useful for other reasons. You want to measure stuff. You want to measure the length of that lower mandible. You just do the same thing I just did. Shift left click, and it will tell you. So that's another thing for a later time. Okay, so I have to then make sure I'm not clicked here in the keyframe window. Click back here I'm just going to left click anywhere here in this 3D volume window, and then I hover over the path and I hit the space bar again, and this is to get my caption. And so logically enough, here is the command for caption. You have several options in this part of the window here. The one I'm just going to mention is the color. In my particular case, I think black for the color of that line rather than orange is going to probably work the best. So I just click on the color, that's the ASCII, I don't know if that's the right way to refer to it, but the sort of representation in letters and numbers of that color. Instead, I want black. Right, so there it is. I click on black here in this dialog, hit OK, and that's my black color. Okay, so it's already selected on caption, and I hit OK, and it brings up this caption dialog. And what do I want to call it? Well, I want to call it the coronoid. You can say coronoid process, I guess. I'm just going to leave it at coronoid. The default font is a little small, so I'm going to move that up to 16. And you probably I think if I hover over one of these little dialogue radio buttons, and then AJ added a lot more information about what this caption command does. It'll disappear once you move the mouse cursor somewhere else. For now, I want also to adjust the color of the text, and I want to make that black as well, because the text for that label is going to show up here against this white background. So obviously black is a good color for that. And I hit OK for that dialog, and then I hit OK again here. And so here I have my label. Yeah. And it's already on keyframe 1. If I start moving this, I'm going to lose my label, or it's not going to be recorded in the movie. So I have to set keyframe again, which I do, and I overwrite that keyframe 1. I don't think I changed anything else, so I hit OK. And then once I play this movie, it's labeled that keyframe until it gets to the next keyframe that doesn't have the label. Okay, Drishti just crashed, but it's no big deal because I saved most of what I did in the previous segment, and it's saved in this file movie1.xml. And so I just drag that into my Drishti window. I want to maximize that to take advantage of my full screen. And here is my work. Now there are a few things that Drishti doesn't include when it writes in XML. Some of you have to reopen your windows. So here's the keyframe editor. I'll just click on that first keyframe. You have to tweak a little bit the transfer function opacity here to get it back to where it was. But the main thing is that these 3 keyframes that I saved before are there. I think I also have to toggle the camera type back to orthographic. There it is. Good, and I have to get scale bar is there, as you see, and then that drop in resolution when I move it. It's not going to affect the output of a movie or your animation, but I kind of much prefer it not dropping in resolution when I move it. So I just hit the H key. So the main thing is that, I just accidentally moved that keyframe 1, that image 1 keyframe. And by the way, you can do that too. You can drag these things so that when it gets from frame 8, it's going to turn much more slowly because there are all these slices in between the 2 saved keyframes that you made. So, that's good to know. Anyways, I'll move this back to where it was, which I think was 20. And what I didn't save stupidly a moment ago was the label that I went to some trouble to create. So let's do that right now. We wanted to label the coronoid process of the mandible, which is this thing here that I'm circling with the mouse pointer. And I'm just going to make a 2-point line. I guess that's redundant, a line with 2 points, of course. That's shift left click to make those 2 blue dots that turn green when I hover over them. Once they're blue, once I have the 2 points to make my line, I hit spacebar, I type path, and then I hover over that path, hit spacebar again, click on caption. I can change the color if I want. I just left clicked on that abbreviation for color. I want black in my case. I hit OK, and then the caption dialog shows up. I'm going to call this Coronoid. I'm going to change the font size to 16, hit OK, change the color again to black because it'll be on a white background. At least it will when I move it. Oops, I don't want to move the whole label. I just want to move that one point. So there it is. And now I want to save, I want to set the keyframe. Oh, I almost got in trouble. If I click on one of these things down here, my hard-earned label is going to disappear. So right away, you can see that the keyframe editor is already on image 1. I want to set that keyframe, overwrite current keyframe at 1. I hit OK. Now I want to save this. So I just hit Control S to save it. It says project saved. And as you may recall in the previous segment, I'll hit play and it'll get up to the next keyframe up to 10 where there isn't a label, and it'll stop. One way to make that label last a little longer is, of course, just to move these other keyframes farther forward, right? So these are the two keyframes without the label. The first keyframe has the label. So now if I hit return the keyframe to 1, hit play, you can see that label stays there a bit longer until it gets, and this time to 30 rather than 20 as it was before. But of course it will turn more slowly as well. So why don't let's go to that keyframe 30 and I'll add the label again. Just do the same thing as I did before. Shift left click, make a path. Spacebar over the path, click on caption. I'll make the label the same again. There's a caption dialog. Increase the font size, make it black, and then drag it out so it's over a white background, and then it's already at 30. I'm going to replace that keyframe. Now you'll see the label change position slightly when you get to 30, but no big deal, and it rotates a little differently. Why don't we bring that back to 20 so it's not quite as so the speed of the movie doesn't change. We'll bring it all the way back to 1, and let's see what it looks like. So that you see that slight change of position due to the fact that the keyframe was slightly different in frame 20 as opposed to 1, or at least the position of the label was, but no big deal. So that's good, I think. And I'm of course going to hit Control S to save my work. And now what I want to do is convert this into a movie, something you can upload to YouTube or export in a way that people who don't have Drishti can actually see the fruit of your labor. And in order to do that, there are lots of options. The one that I would recommend, the one that I've typically done, is this one here, Save Image Sequence. And this first step is actually not about creating a movie per se. It's just saving individual frames that you can use a different program. In my case, what I'll show you in a moment is ImageJ, and then you use ImageJ to make the movie. So here I'm just going to left click on File, Save Image Sequence. Now this next step is quite important. It gives you the size, the pixel size of this image, 1529 pixels on the X, 706 on the Y, and that is going to be arbitrary. Whatever your monitor is, whatever the size of your window has been, that's what it's going to save as. And that might work, but I think probably a better bet for typical YouTube visibility with the kind of equipment that most people have these days, you'd probably want a 16:9 ratio. That's going to be on the low end, but still perfectly visible. So I'm going to pick 1280x720. That's going to be the image size it's going to export these images to. And it depends. If your image is really up close to the edge of one of these axes, then you might cut something off. I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case here, but we'll see. So 1280x720 image size, I click OK. Now this next step is a bit, you need to be careful because you need to tell Drishti where to save this. So you need to click on File. I'm just going to save it on my desktop. I'll give it a new folder. I'm going to call it Movie, I don't know, Shrew Movie. Let's call it that. And that's the name of the folder. So that's step 1. And you need to tell what the root file name is going to be. So I'm just going to call this shrew, and it's going to save it, I think in the first instance as PNGs, and it'll append numbers to each one of these. In my case, it'll be 40 frames. Okay, and I hit save, and start frame 1, end frame 40. That's pretty much all we defined here, and then I hit OK. So there it goes. It's now writing each one of those individual slices to a PNG file that we can use in a moment to export to something like an AVI. So let's see what that looks like. Here's my folder, Shrew Movie, on my desktop, and there you see 40 PNG files with each one of these slices in it. And I can just open them one by one in any photo editor. I'm just using the right arrow key. This is some random Microsoft default photo editor program, and it kind of looks like a movie, but of course I'm just using the arrow keys, and we still have a ways to go. Not that far, but the next part now is making or converting this set of individual images into something that you could upload to YouTube, for example. And for that, I'm going to use ImageJ. For some reason, I guess it's been Fiji is just ImageJ for a few years now, whatever. What I want to do in this case is import. So I left-click, File, Import. I'll put the link to this, another great open source program, been around for decades, ImageJ. I'll put the link in the chat window. Left-click, File, Import, Image Sequence. And I want to go back to my desktop. It's now, for some reason, Fiji has got a peculiar memory, so it's sending me somewhere else on my computer. But here, this is what I want. Desktop Shrew Movie, that's what I just wrote. And there you see all those individual numbered PNG files. I'm just going to click on any one of them. Just the first one. These are the only files in that folder. I hit open, and they're all very small. I could open it all into memory. It wouldn't take that long, but if you have a big folder with lots of data in it, it's probably better to use a virtual stack. It won't load every one of them into memory right away. So you pretty much get instantaneously this stack that in ImageJ you can use to rotate through the whole thing. All right, my shrew skull with its labeled coronoid. And to export this as AVI, it's really simple. We just save as AVI. And here, JPEG compression so that the AVI file isn't absolutely ginormous. You can experiment with others if you want. I'm just going to stick with JPEG. 7 frames per second is pretty fast, right? So there are only 40 frames. And if you're squeezing 7 of them into 1 second, then, that's going to be less than 7 seconds. So I don't know, maybe you could have 40 seconds if we did 1 frame per second, but that's a little slow. I'm going to pick 3. You will experiment and find out what's best for you, and you hit OK. And then the next step, it just asks you what the name of this should be, and I think the default Shrew Movie looks absolutely fine. And then I hit save, and then this dialog tells you it did it pretty fast because it's a really small set of images. I go back to my folder with Shrew Movie, page down, and there it is, Shrew Movie AVI. And this is something that you can open with lots of different files. So these default Windows things, VLC is something I use a lot. So let's see what it looks like in VLC. It's asking me to update, I don't care. And that's it. That's my movie with your labeled structure on your CT scan animation, mostly with Drishti, a little bit with ImageJ. And everyone, I hope you found that helpful.